So, afternoon guys, and welcome back to another Fridays from the van on a pretty miserable afternoon here in Portrush in Northern Ireland. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon and it already looks like the sun is about to set. Now, I was contemplating not doing a Fridays from the van today. Obviously, the ongoing situation. As of yesterday, we have just had our lockdown extended for another 6 weeks, taking us up to the 1st of April. Not that you could tell here in Portrush because there's a lot of people who shouldn't be here, but that's a whole different story. So just things getting pushed beyond are a bit demoralising. You know, I wasn't a big fan of the original Groundhog Day, and this remake certainly is a bit jarring. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, the ongoing situation has kind of forced my hand a little bit. You know, tough times for everyone who is, self-employed, and especially in the artist side of things. And so I started looking around for a little part-time job, and I was under no illusions, a lack of experience in service industry, things like that. And so it's been slim pickings. Now, obviously, we live in a very small catchment area in terms of not a huge amount of jobs going, but those that I have applied for, unfortunately, there's been a lot of Dear John rejection letters. So yeah, that's been a little bit demoralising as well. Just not being in a great place mentally, if I'm completely honest, and I always try to be honest on this channel. As I've said a number of times before, being creative for me is one of the key ways that I can keep for want of a better word, the darkness at bay. And I've struggled the last week, 10 days from that creativity side of things, just with a lot of other bits and pieces, a lot of noise going on in my head, and that I find it can be difficult to motivate myself to go out and create. Of course, I also have to remind myself that I don't have to be in a creative mode every minute of every day. And in fact, that is a valuable lesson when perhaps the jar, the well, whatever analogy you want to give is feeling empty, to just go off and do something else. I love to run. I'm even contemplating downloading the latest Football Manager. Now, I'm a huge Football Manager fan, football simulation fan. But the last version that I owned, and I played, I think something like 8,000 hours of it, was Football Manager 2013. I got the demo of 2021, and it's an absolute, in terms of data analysis and all that stuff. But I'm actually thinking of just giving myself a little bit of free time to just do something completely different. Maybe be the next Alex Ferguson, or move over Ollie. Nigel's at the wheel. But in a more serious note, I think what I'm finding is, I guess, giving myself permission to step away from the camera, and not just step away from the camera, but step away from anything photography related. I'm finding these last few months that when I wasn't out with a camera, I was then maybe editing a vlog, or I was doing something, with prints, or thinking about doing some writing, or looking at other people's work to see whether I can incorporate those in my Fridays from the van. And while being self-employed and running your own business, you do work, all of the hours of the day. I think it can also be quite unhealthy to do nothing but that. And so one of the things that, as I'm giving myself a little bit of permission to do, is just step away from everything photography related, and even everything creativity related. And I'm hoping that over these next couple of weeks I'm able to integrate that into my sort of daily routines, where it's not just all about create, because I do feel as though I wouldn't class it as burnout per se, more so just stepping away and giving myself a little bit of fresh perspective. So hopefully, maybe you're finding yourself in a similar situation. You're struggling with creativity, you're struggling with your photography, or whatever your creative pursuit is. I think it can be healthy to step away from that for a period of time and do something completely different. And as again we say over here, get your head shard. So as you know, one of the things that I like to do from time to time is look back at my old images and just see mostly what mistakes I made and how I could maybe improve things. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to look back at a couple of images from October 2019, and we're mostly going to be looking at the processing that I achieved here. I certainly, looking back at a number of my images, I still believe that I'm perhaps a little bit heavy-handed in a number of my images, and trying to achieve that more natural look with images is something that I'm striving towards. So we'll take a look back through 4 images and see what mistakes I made in the field, and of course with post-processing as well. So this is the first image from the herring pond in Port Stewart, a location that I'm sure needs little introduction if you've been following my channel for any length of time. Now, this frame is actually a blended frame from 3 different exposures, just to allow me to retain the detail and the textures in the sky, and also provide a little bit of detail in those shadows. Now, what I would say is my first impression looking back at this image is crunchy, over-processed, unnatural. Now, an image like this probably would garner more interest and more likes on social media because it's a bit more in your face. But for me, one of the things I'm really trying so hard at is to keep things as natural as possible. And this certainly stepped beyond that mark. Now, if I go into a second attempted edit on this frame, I think perhaps it's a little bit more, if we just compare those 2 images, I think the one on the right is just a little bit more natural. Now, as an overall frame and as an overall frame with lighting, I think when I process it to its natural conclusion, I think I can see that the light maybe wasn't all that to begin with. And what has happened here is I've added sort of some unnatural light and some unnatural conditions, whereas actually here in this image, this is probably more what it was like. Now, just looking at that image on the right, what I probably could do is I could just increase the overall exposure a touch as well. Let's just bring that up just a notch, and we'll go back into the library mode and compare these 2 images. So I do prefer the processing now on this one on the right hand side. Certainly the one on the left, just a little bit too much over processed. But overall the image itself I don't think really has much legs. So an image from the same morning down at the herring pond, and I've always loved these rocks, the textures and the colour of the lichen, especially when they are lit by an early morning rising sun with some either direct light or in this case some reflective light pouring in. What I would say, however, is once again I think this image, looking back on it now, is perhaps a little bit garish, a little bit unnatural. Not least the tint. Now, while I have pushed the tint here a reasonable amount, I actually think part of the problem is the profile being used, Adobe Landscape. If I was to even drop this into Adobe Color, you can see that almost immediately has actually had a more pleasing, in my eye anyway, result. Now, if we come on to an unedited image of the same scene and see whether we can make a very quick, better fist at the processing. So the first thing I'll do, I'll just tidy up the crop just a touch. Straighten that up a bit. So obviously, one of the big changes that I've made in my workflow since the turn of the year is in the profile used as I'm importing images. What I'm doing now is I'm maintaining the profile that was used when I shot the frame. Now I still have full control over which profile to use, and in fact, as you know, you can go in and I could even go in and replicate some of the other Fujifilm film simulations here. But if we just keep it to the previous standard. Now, certainly this image, as expected, does need a couple of tweaks, not least if we drag up a soft edge grad, and we'll just raise the highlights or raise the exposure just a touch. And then what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to bring the shadows all the way along, and then I'm just going to lower those back down again until things start looking, to my eye, more natural. Now, I could be tempted as well to do something here with the sky to give it a little bit more oomph. Not least, maybe darken it down a little bit and then bring those highlights down and maybe bring the blacks down, push the whites, do all kinds of crazy stuff that, gives you a bit more, whoa. But yeah, that's definitely not what we want to be doing. So let's get rid of that. And in fact, it might even be that the sky as it is probably going to be completely fine. So again, we'll just drag a very soft edge grad onto the frame. And we'll just bring the exposure down just a touch. I'm paying close attention to this top left hand corner, that we don't sort of start to unnaturally darken that. I'm just going to bring the highlights down. Just going to bring them down again quite a lot, and then I'm going to pull them back along again, just until to my eye things are looking a bit more natural. So again, what I'm looking for here is that balance throughout the image. I don't really want this to look like it's been manipulated per se, and I think this is probably a little bit more of a natural look than the previous image. Again, that one on the left, if anything, the one on the left, even though I wasn't using it, the one on the left looks like I've used a badly tinted either ND or an ND grad, where we start to get those unnatural sort of purples throughout the frame. Whereas the image on the right, I much prefer just a more subtle feel. Now, if I was taking this processing further, I would probably look to work to bring out maybe a little bit more texture without making things too crunchy in the foreground. Maybe increase the luminance of the yellows of the lichen. But there's not a huge amount more that I would do to this image. Just a nice subtle dawn, which is how I remember it back on the day. So another image made looking towards Old Nessie on West Strand here in Portrush. Now what I find at this location is, depending on the time of the year, especially over the sort of later in the year, earlier in the year, the sort of winter months, you can actually be faced with quite a challenging white balance. A lot of the scene will be cast in the shadow because there's no direct light, but little pockets of the scene might be taking on some of the warmer colour through reflective light or further into the frame, such as here we have some reflective light, and then we have very cool tones, and then again some nice warmer tones out in the distance. Now if I just come over onto a virtual copy, and this is actually how the image was shot, and to me again it just is, I don't mind the sort of pinks and the sort of cooler tones here, but up in the sky I think we kind of, again, it almost feels like I've pulled down a graduated filter and I'm getting some color cast. So what if I was to just go through some of these white balance settings? Again, daylight's giving us a cooler tone, but again it seems to be messing up a little bit. Now as we start to warm the frame up a touch, that perhaps balances things out a little bit better. Now I could probably make a better fist of this if I was to drag a soft edge grad up and maybe just warm the bottom of the frame up just a touch, just to give us a little bit more of a graduated feel, and then maybe the top of the frame, just some of that purple. I don't want to go too far, but with just some of that sort of tint, just a touch. Maybe warm that sky up just a little bit as well. Maybe, I'm not sure. I think my point here, and my sort of point of reference to myself here, is when faced with challenging white balance in the field, it can be all too easy to literally set it just to any old white balance, because in the back of your head you're saying, I'm shooting raw, I'll be able to recover this. But in my experience, I would have been better served here to pay a bit more attention to the white balance and set that in camera, knowing that when I got home things would have been a little bit kinder on the processing side. So the effort that I sort of quickly have made here is perhaps a little bit better than the original, but I still think I would have been better served, as I said, in dealing with white balance better in the field. So, time for my photographer of the week, and this is a photographer who I've only just discovered in the last couple of weeks, but my goodness me, I'm so glad that I did. Some of his work is just incredible. So without further ado, my photographer of the week. So my photographer of the week is Rene, and I'm going to offer my apologies here for pronouncing your surname wrong, Algesheimer. Now, I've only just discovered Rene's work in the last probably 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm so glad that I have. Absolutely beautiful. I think there is a real sense of serenity in a number of Rene's images. A real sense of stillness and calmness, mindfulness, light, texture, tones. And what I really love about his work is there seems to be quite a breadth to it. You've probably heard me speaking about this before, where I struggle sometimes with having a bit of a battle with whether I should focus on one particular type of work. I really do get a huge sense of enjoyment out of the intimate landscape, but at the same time I can be quite drawn towards, bigger vista views when the light is right. I love doing a little bit of ICM, I love doing a little bit of abstract images. And I think one thing looking through Rene's work is there's quite a mixture, but each type, each image has still got those beautiful traits, the stillness, the peace, colour, depth, tones and textures. I love in his statements on his Instagram page, he's engaged in the study of wonder. I think that's something that we could all have a little bit more of when we go out into the field with our cameras, or even when we just go out for a walk. A childlike sense of wonder. I almost would want to make that my mantra every morning as I step out the door, or even before I put my foot to the floor getting out of bed. Let this today be a day where I have a huge sense of wonder, as I think that's where some of our best work can come from. Just a little side note on his Instagram page, I love how he has put together some tiles together to make a bigger image, and while I'm sure they look wonderful once they are complete, and by the looks of things, we've just had an extra image put on that has shifted everything to the right, so it'll be another couple of images before this is complete. But there's a few of these that will be complete at that time. But I actually quite like, let me just zoom out here a little bit. I actually quite like that the images are sort of almost not complete. You're just waiting on them to be completed. But I just thought that was a very nice touch. Now on his website, which again I highly recommend you go and peruse, there are a couple of projects on here that need some archive work as well, but I really love the Together project, which, reading the artist statement, I think it's quite apt, even though it looks like this was started pre-current situation. I think it's quite apt regarding a lot of us have lost that togetherness, or it has been diminished because of the current situation. But what I really love about the project is we have these images that are inverted both in terms of the colour, but also inverted from a dimensions perspective as well, flipped. I really think that's a lovely idea and executed superbly. I think this would make a really nice book. Put aside maybe half an hour this coming weekend. I'll include the link obviously to René's Instagram page below, and from there you can head on over to his website. And let's all take a little leaf out of René's book here, and let's try to be a bit more engaged in the study and the sense of childlike wonder. René Algesheimer, my photographer of the week. Okay guys, so apologies, I'm acutely aware that this video is way too long, but just very quickly, a couple of something for the weekend, sir. So first up, the shortlist for the British Sports Journalism Awards was recently announced, and I always looked forward to this time of the year when I was both pitch side, working on the picture desk, and even now when I've hung up my sports photography days. Some incredible images, and trust me, if you're anyway interested in sports photography, or especially if you're thinking of getting into sports photography, then I would certainly advise you to spend a little bit of time looking through some of these images. Incredible work from a bunch of hugely talented photographers and fantastic people in their own right as well. I learnt quite a lot from a number of the guys here who have got images on the shortlist. One of the things that I always tried to do in my sports photography days, and one of the things I tried to get the guys to do in our team when I was working on the picture desk, was look beyond just the two men and a ball. It can be so easy to get sucked into following the action, but you miss so much, and it's wonderful to see that there is now a category away from the action, because I think some of these images can be almost timeless and, outlive a standard picture of two men tackling for the ball. So it's great to see that there is a whole category for that. But I would certainly encourage you to spend a little bit of time looking through these. Some of the images are just incredible, just wonderful, and again capturing moments. And I think one of the things that really is coming out from the images from this year's portfolios is, of course, we're also capturing a real slice of history, empty stadiums as well. So absolutely fantastic. And one of my favourite images, now I haven't looked down through all of the images yet, but one of my favourites is from Eddie Keogh, and that's the profile here of Gareth Southgate. I don't know what it is, I just love it. I think it's an absolutely fantastic image. So take a little bit of time, I'll put the link down below. The British Sports Journalism Awards, certainly worthwhile taking a look through. So second up is some of you may have already seen this announcement on Twitter from Alex Neil, but it was an announcement of a brand new landscape photography competition, the Natural Landscape Photography Awards. Now there's probably going to be some of you out there who are rolling your eyes and saying, do we really need another landscape photography competition? And I guess I get you as well. When I first saw this announcement, I kind of thought the same thing. I think competitions can be quite polarizing, especially for those who maybe, let's face it, 99% of people don't get anywhere beyond the first round, and so it can be quite a polarizing and demoralizing thing that is out there. But digging just a little bit deeper, I think the title of the competition certainly pricked my interest, and knowing the photographers who are backing this, it certainly got my interest as well. And what the guys are trying to do is basically put together a competition that, as they have put here, a competition designed to promote photographers looking to work within the constraints of the natural landscape and traditional bounds of photography. Now, one could argue there shouldn't be any rules in photography, and I think everyone would 100% agree with that. But I also think that it's quite good that we're seeing a competition here that has clearly highlighted some elements that won't be allowed in this particular competition, such as removing of elements and distortion of viewpoints, combining images to sort of give that sort of crazy perspective. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out once the guys, because I'm pretty sure we're going to get, especially if we look at who the judges are, go back to the homepage, the judges themselves are in their own right all incredible individual landscape photographers, educators, ambassadors for this wonderful craft of landscape photography, and so that in itself, I'm sure, is going to draw in thousands upon thousands of entries. And so it'll be interesting to see how the team manage that, the boundaries of acceptable versus not acceptable. I think what I'm looking forward to most is when I think about a natural landscape, and I alluded to this in my sort of little image review, trying to look at images that, while they are spectacularly lit, some of them, you almost don't think about the processing side of things. It all looks very natural. And I think some of these photographers, Joe, William, Adam, to name three, who I'm sort of very familiar with, their work, just take a look at their websites. Not once, I think, would you take a look and say, well, is there something unnatural going on there? So I'm certainly looking forward. I'm probably not going to submit any images myself. Never say never. I might well do. But I'm really looking forward to seeing the results from this. And I actually had a conversation with Alex in terms of what they plan to do with the shortlisted, the sort of commended, and the winning images, whether there's going to be a book or an ebook. So I would love to see something like that come out of this as well. So get your images out there, enter if you sort of want to, but as always with competitions, just be aware that first round, the judges really do have maybe 5 seconds or something to view your image. So if it doesn't get any further, do not take that as a knock on your own individual images, because as I said, landscape or any photography competition can be extremely polarizing and create a lot of anguish among photographers. So hopefully this one is taken in the right spirit of things, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results and the overall commended and winning images. Alright guys, so I think that's going to do it. We are way over time. Just a couple of housekeeping things at the end. Firstly, you can obviously sign up to my newsletter. I'll put the link below. I obviously have a number of prints available for sale on my website. They're limited edition landscape prints, and then I also have a few open edition landscape and wildlife prints. As part of my limited edition set, I actually have a couple of discounted prints in there. Now these are no longer part of the official limited edition set because they have a couple of small blemishes on the print themselves. Full description on the sales page. But if you're interested in one of those, then normally priced at £35, these A3 prints are now at £25, including UK postage and packaging. I'm really going to stop jabbering now. We will catch up on Sunday when I think we're out along the Causeway coast. Bit of a stormy, moody morning along East Strand. Right, that's me, honestly. I'm going. You've heard enough of me today. Take care, guys, and once again, thanks a lot for watching. Until next time, bye bye.